Fine. So, and now let's get to the brain trauma. Okay, so brain trauma, and I'll divide, as I said, into diffuse lesions, and focal. So first, diffuse. So this diffuse, I mean very simple lesion, or I shouldn't say maybe a lesion, I should say just a functional problem. Is what? But we see it like diffusely, that there is a diffuse now, let's say blackout of the brain. And what do you call that? Concussion, exactly. So concussion, very simple, knockout, concussion, no one knows. It's knockout, Mike Tyson, remember? Knockout in the first half minute. That's concussion, we don't know what's behind it. Some say it's something with synapses, depends. That's very simple. So I would rather imagine something with the brainstem and whatever, some hit to the brainstem, I don't know. It's not clear, but we know it happens in any box when it is ended earlier, typically. Anyways, that's one thing, simple, like functional thing. Concussion is, we say it's like there are no anatomical changes. If you do a CT, there shouldn't be anything, okay? So concussion means someone hit myself or I hit myself. I'm unconscious for a few seconds, okay? Then I'm waking up and there's nothing on a CT or MRI. But to be honest, guess what? I'm sure you're losing some neurons. And definitely you are, because we know boxers. So that's concussion. The other extreme, we could again put it into the rather diffuse trauma, is what? It has the diffuse term in it. Well, you know, but we're talking about trauma. Diffuse axonal injury, that's what I meant. And by the way, in my previous videos, I'm talking about Schumacher, which I thought maybe that he had a diffuse axonal injury. We don't know. But 14 days ago, I talked to someone and he said, hey, there's one thing, that he had a GoPro camera on his helmet. Did you hear that? Yeah. So then he had an impression. So very likely it's not diffuse axonal injury. I don't know. Maybe the camera can also like increase the speed of the rotation, or there was an impression. So anyways, but diffuse axonal injury, what is that again? And you know that all? Although everything is fine, you are protected by, airbags in the car, whatever. The problem is when the head rotates. If it's a fast acceleration and deceleration of the brain, you will tear your axons in the brain. And there's no way back. And now it depends how serious the lesion is. But again, as I told you last year, funny thing about diffuse axonal injury is you come to a patient and he's in a coma, or it could be a vegetative state, or really neurologically deficient. And then you do a CT and it looks nice. The gyrifications are fine over there. But you can see a few dots sometimes. That's small bleed where the axons got torn, okay? And there's no way back, because once axons are torn in the CNS, you cannot do anything about it, okay? So diffuse axonal injury, remember, it's the rotational acceleration, deceleration, DAI. Very dangerous, and typically, they can end in a vegetative state as well. Or they die, of course. Vegetative state, die, or serious impairment. But rather you can talk about it like that there's a diffuse problem, yeah? Now, there are helmets. It can happen during bike ride, it can happen during skiing, or anytime you go fast and somehow hit your head. You heard about the helmets which have like a nest. You got the polystyrene cover and then you have a nest there. And so basically the idea is that the polystyrene sort of can slide on your head a bit. So I hit something that the helmet won't transform all the rotational acceleration on the head, okay? That's the MIPS, I think, system. I don't know how much this works. I guess it has a logic in it. Anyway, so the AI. And now let's get to the focal one. So what about the focal lesions? Which ones you know? No, stroke again. watch out, but it's okay. Everyone that stroke, again, it's a non-traumatic brain lesion. So this happens spontaneously. Now, today we're talking about traumas. So you fall somewhere, someone hits you with a baseball bat, that's what we're talking about today.
The coup, contrecoup?
Okay, so that would be what?
Focal.
Focal, and what is that? You're right. Those are contusions. Okay, so contusions, very good. And contusion happens, it's the same like if you have a contusion of a muscle, same thing happens with the brain. So if someone hits you with a baseball bat or you hit the wall, you can have contusions. And you can have it in any time. And they can of the brain, okay? So remember first, obviously, it's contusion. Very good. So, and contusion, you should imagine that the vessels already got torn, the capillaries, and they're bleeding a bit, okay? And exactly, you can have coup, which are French terms. But the idea is, if we do a CT, you have a bleeding here. This should be white. And by the way, today again, if there is an acute bleeding, and I'm repeating it all the time, how does it look on a CT? Acute within the brain. What color? White or dark?
White.
It's always white. And why? Why it is white? Because it's coagulum. It's immediately coagulum, and this has a high density. So it absorbs lots of X-rays, and that's why you see it white. Okay? And that's why also on all the CTs, when you do a CT scan of bleeding in the brain, if it's acute, it's white. But later, in 1 week, 2 weeks, it liquefies the coagulum, so then it gets darker, and it turns dark totally, okay? So within the CT, if you do a CT now, I'm doing CT now, I don't know how long it was, 3 days or a week. If it's white, I know it's acute. If it's darker, it happened longer time ago, okay? Yeah? Okay? So remember, it's coagulum, and when someone is doing the hematomas we're going to talk about, they're taking out coagulums. It's not liquefied. It's not like liquid blood. It's coagulum immediately. And the same is with contusion. Then there are small coagulums within the brain parenchyma, okay? And coup means if I hit myself here with a wall, so there could be, this would be like where's right and where's left, guys? It's the opposite, yeah? So this is left side, this is right side. So this would be frontally on the right side, contusion there. And typically when I hit something, sometimes the brain hits the wall here and then goes back and hits it in the back. So this would be a coup contusion over here, this one. And then I would have second one here, contrecoup. It's in high speeds, but most commonly you have only one, or depends, but you have one contusion. The contrecoup is rather not as common, of course, but yeah, we use these terms. You can have multiple contusions, okay? I mean, you somehow hit yourself, you can have in both frontal lobes or wherever, okay? There could be many contusions sometimes. Depends how severe it is. The more severe it is, more contusions you have. But contusion means there's a small bleeding within the parenchyma because the small vessels ruptured, they bleed it. Again, it always depends. You do a CT and you see how big is the contusion. And then you can tell if you should do a surgery or not. Typically, it's a small contusion, and you don't have to do anything. So you leave it like that, okay? And you just follow. If it expands, and you can tell if it's somehow sucking too much of water, and it expands, and suddenly you see, and what you're checking on a CT is how much the middle structures are shifted to one or other side, okay? If there is a really huge contusion, big one, that expands and somehow compresses the other side, then you have to go and do a surgery. You go inside, you take part of the contusion and return the bone typically if it's not swollen too much, okay? So, and basically, it's kind of a decompression by taking out the part of the contusion. But in most cases, you're not dealing with contusion so much. Depends again how severe it is. Okay, so that first thing. Contusion, and this can combine with anything we're going to talk now further. So what would second focal lesion? Very serious. Well, in general, I mean now we're talking about hematomas, okay? So you know these very well, I'm sure. So what would be this? I'm going to write it here and then jump to another. So Another focal lesion is epidural hematoma. Yeah, okay. And of course, you can have contusion and an epidural hematoma. But typically, more likely, you're going to have only epidural hematoma in this case. But sometimes you can. It depends. Like you hit yourself, you had a fracture, and then there could be a contusion within the brain, but rather not. Okay, rather not, but it's possible. So that's epidural hematoma. And the other one, more serious, remember, is subdural hematoma. Okay, yeah? And I'm going to, again, change it here. Change the color. Subdural hematoma. And now within these three, I'm talking about acute hematomas, okay? Or contusion is acute. Okay, that's very important. Okay? So in all of these three cases, it's going to be at the beginning white. But now let's get to epidural hematoma. So thanks for watching. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell. And as always, check the description below for supplementary questions and other materials.